Hi friends, welcome. I am Dr. Satish Belamkar with the learning episode on development of hybridoma for monoclonal antibodies. The content writer is Dr. Rashmi Tambe. The whole episode divided into 5 modules. So take a look on what we are going to study today. Module 1, generation of hybridomas. Module 2, monoclonal antibody production for diagnostic and therapeutic purposes. Module 3, recombinant DNA expression products for human therapeutic use. Module 4, hemopoietic growth factors, and Module 5, future of recombinant DNA products. Let's start with our first module, generation of hybridomas. Permanent cell lines secreting monoclonal antibodies. Production of monoclonal antibodies involves in vivo or in vitro procedures or combinations thereof. Before production of antibodies by either method, hybrid cells that will produce the antibodies are generated. The steps in producing those cells are outlined below. The generation of monoclonal antibodies producing cells requires the use of animals, usually mice. The procedure yields a cell line capable of producing one type of antibody protein for a long period. A tumor from this immortal cell line is called a hybridoma. No method of generating a hybridoma that avoids the use of animals has been found. Recent in vitro techniques allow the intracellular production of antigen binding antibody fragments, but such techniques are still experimental and have an uncertain yield, efficacy and antibody function. It has also been possible to genetically replace much of the mouse monoclonal antibody producing genes with human sequences, reducing the immunogenicity of monoclonal antibodies destined for clinical use in humans. Before the advent of the hybridoma method, investigators could produce only polyclonal serum antibodies. This required large numbers of immunized animals and did not immortalize the antibody producing cells. So, it required repeated animal use to obtain more antibodies. Development of the hybridoma technology has reduced the number of animals, that is mice, rabbits and so on, required to produce a given antibody, but with a decrease in animal welfare when the ascites method is used. Step 1, immunization of mice and selection of mouse donors for generation of hybridoma cells. Mice are immunized with an antigen that is prepared for injection either by emulsifying the antigen with fruits adjuvant or other adjuvants, or by homogenizing a gel slice that contains the antigen. Intact cells, whole membranes and microorganisms are sometimes used as immunogens. In almost all laboratories, mice are used to produce the desired antibodies. In general, mice are immunized every 2 to 3 weeks, but the immunization protocols vary among investigators. When a sufficient antibody titer is reached in serum, immunized mice are euthanized and the spleen removed to use as a source of cells for fusion with myeloma cells. Step 2, screening of mice for antibody production. After several weeks of immunization, blood samples are obtained from mice for measurement of serum antibodies. Several humane techniques have been developed for collection of small volumes of blood from mice. Serum antibody titer is determined with various techniques such as enzyme linked immunosorbent assay and flow cytometry. If the antibody titer is high, cell fusion can be performed. If the titer is too low, mice can be boosted until an adequate response is achieved, as determined by repeated blood sampling. When the antibody titer is high enough, mice are commonly boosted by injecting antigen without adjuvant intraperitoneally or intravenously via the tail veins 3 days before fusion but 2 weeks after the previous immunization. Then the mice are euthanized and their spleens removed for in vitro hybridoma cell production. Step 3. Preparation of myeloma cells. Fusing antibody producing spleen cells which have a limited lifespan with cells derived from an immortal tumor of lymphocytes results in a hybridoma that is capable of unlimited growth. Myeloma cells are immortalized cells that are cultured with 8-azaguanine to ensure their sensitivity to the hypoxanthine aminopterin thymidine selection medium used after cell fusion. A week before cell fusion, myeloma cells are grown in 8-azaguanine cells must have high viability and rapid growth. The HAT medium allows only the few cells to survive in culture. Step 4. Fusion of myeloma cells with immune spleen cells. Single spleen cells from the immunized mouse are fused with the previously prepared myeloma cells. Fusion is accomplished by co-centrifuging freshly harvested spleen cells and myeloma cells in polyethylene glycol, a substance that causes cell membranes to fuse. As noted in step 3, only fused cells will grow in the special selection medium. The cells are then distributed to 96 well plates containing feeder cells derived from saline peritoneal washes of mice. Feeder cells are believed to supply growth factors that promote growth of the hybridoma cells. Commercial preparations that result from the collection of media supporting the growth of cultured cells and contain growth factors are available that can be used in lieu of mouse derived feeder cells. It is also possible to use murine bone marrow derived macrophages as feeder cells. Step 5. Cloning of hybridoma cell lines by limiting dilution or expansion and stabilization of clones by ascites production. At this step, new small clusters of hybridoma cells from the 96 well plates can be grown in tissue cultures followed by selection for antigen binding or grown by the mouse ascites method with cloning at a later time. Cloning by limiting dilution at this time ensures that a majority of wells each contain at most a single clone. Considerable judgment is necessary at this stage to select hybridomas capable of expansion versus the total loss of the cell fusion product due to underpopulation or inadequate in vitro growth at high dilution. In some instances, the secreted antibodies are toxic to fragile cells maintained in vitro. Optimizing the mouse ascites expansion method at this stage can save the cells. Also, it is the experience of many that a brief period of growth by the mouse ascites method produces cell lines that at later in vitro and in vivo stages show enhanced hardiness and optimal antibody production. Guidelines have been published to assist investigators in using the mouse ascites method in these ways. Module 2. Monoclonal antibody production for diagnostic and therapeutic purposes. The amount of monoclonal antibody needed and the importance of such factors as cost, turnaround time and regulatory compliance depends on the purpose. The very competitive diagnostic industry is concerned with cost, turnaround time and regulatory requirements. The diagnostic industry scale of monoclonal antibody production is usually small to medium and seldom large. The therapeutic industry is considerably less concerned than the diagnostic industry with cost and turnaround time, and its production scale is medium to large. The therapeutic industry is highly regulated and sensitive to regulatory structure and to the very high regulatory cost of any procedural change. The biotechnology industry that develops therapeutic agents produces monoclonal antibodies on a small to medium scale. It is less concerned with cost of production than the diagnostic industry and much more concerned than the therapeutic industry, but turnaround time is very important. Therefore, it requires rapid turnaround to increase the chance of being first in the marketplace with a product that will probably have a short lifespan. Commercial monoclonal antibody production requires more than the culturing of large batches of cells or their injection into large number of mice. It requires considerable pre-production efforts to ensure that the cell line is stable, can produce commercially appropriate quantities of a stable antibody, and can produce an uncontaminated product. Commercial production also involves building a high quality facility for in vivo and in vitro production and for processing of the antibody. There is a need for quality control and quality assurance departments to meet the requirements of good manufacturing practices that are required for commercial products. Product lot testing is necessary to ensure product reproducibility. Production process verification and documentation are necessary to protect the consumer and are required by FDA in its regulatory points to consider in the manufacture and testing of monoclonal antibodies products for human use. Module 3, Recombinant DNA expression products for human therapeutic use. Recombinant DNA technology has made a revolutionary impact in the area of human healthcare by enabling mass production of safe, pure and effective recombinant DNA expression products. Currently, several categories of recombinant DNA products like hormones of therapeutic interest, hemopoietic growth factors, blood coagulation products, thrombolytic agents, anticoagulants, interferons, interleukins and therapeutic enzymes are being produced using recombinant DNA technology for human use. The present lecture provides information on different aspects like expression systems, production, purification, analysis and therapeutic applications of recombinant DNA products. Further, feature of recombinant DNA products and Indian scenario are also highlighted. This lecture should be beneficial to biotechnology scientists and manufacturers of biopharmaceuticals. Production and purification of recombinant DNA products. A general process for the production of recombinant DNA products is illustrated. The first step is to isolation of the identified gene that is responsible for expression of the desired product. After isolation and characterization of the human gene, it is inserted into small circular piece of DNA called plasmid. The recombinant plasmid is inserted into a bacterial yeast or cultured animal cell. Clones of transformed host cell are isolated and those that produce the protein of interest in the desired quantities are preserved under suitable condition as a master cell bank. The cell bank are characterized and properly maintained for use in subsequent transformation procedures. The bank should be periodically tested for cell viability, genetic and phenotypic stability. As manufacturing needs arise, cells from working cell can be scaled up to produce the product in roller bottles and or fermenters. The following points should be considered for production of recombinant DNA products. Number 1. Plasmid instability is a major problem in continuous and large scale fermentation since these cultures go through many generations. The resulting effects are lower productivity and increase in production cost because of the buildup of non-productive plasmid free cells. Mathematically structured and unstructured kinetic models of plasmid stability have been developed which are ultimately useful for design of recombinant processes. Second point, high level expression of recombinant DNA products in different host systems can often result in aggregation and accumulation of inclusion bodies. Under appropriate conditions, the recombinant DNA products may get deposited in inclusion bodies in approximately 50% or more of the total cell protein. The recombinant DNA protein is highly pure, stable and compact. Recovery of soluble active recombinant DNA protein from the inclusion body requires the following steps to be carried out. Isolation of the inclusion body from cell disruption and centrifugation. Solubilization of the inclusion body protein using a catrope. Under reducing conditions to separate all disulfide bonds. Recovery of active protein by removal of denaturant under conditions that allow the protein to adopt its native configuration. Undesired disulfide bonds, if present in the structure, need to be reoxidized under controlled condition, achieving their correct configuration present in native structure. The cell bank should be periodically tested for cell viability, genetic and phenotype stability. When eukaryotic cells are used for production, distinguishing genetic, phenotypic and immunological markers of the cell will be useful in establishing the identity of the cells. Likewise, when microbial cultures are used, specific phenotypic features which form a basis for identification should be described. Traditional small scale fermenters are used for expansion of cells in suspension culture. The presence, extent and nature of any microbial contamination in the culture vessels must be thoroughly examined at suitable stages during production. All the systems associated with fermenters must be validated before being routinely used. In India, validation study should be carried out with follow-up validation studies at appropriate time intervals. Unintended variability in culture during production may lead to changes which cause alteration in the product. Such variations might result in differing yield of the products. The steps in a production process should be validated to ensure that the process intermediates are within specifications. Any assay used during process validation must itself be validated. Before the process validation is commenced, purification is important aspect in the production of recombinant DNA products. The overall goal of purification is to bring as much product with as little loss as possible. In case the desired product is intracellular, fermentation is followed by harvesting of cells. This step is normally achieved by centrifugation or filtration. The cells are disrupted or lysed and cell debris is removed by centrifugation, leaving behind a dilute solution of crude desired product. If mammalian or yeast system is used, the desired product can be obtained directly from the medium. Nowadays, ultrafiltration has become the method of choice of concentration of products. There are several different methods that can be used for purification of recombinant DNA products, but only chromatographic purification methods are generally used. A combination of 2 to 4 different chromatographic techniques is generally employed in a typical downstream processing procedure. Gel filtration and ion exchange chromatography are the most common. Affinity chromatography is employed wherever possible, as it has high biospecificity and one can achieve a high degree of purification. Appropriate attention needs to be given to validation of the purification process, such as column loading capacity and column regeneration. The purification process must be validated to ensure that it is adequate to remove extraneous substances such as chemicals used in purification, column contaminations, endotoxin, residual cellular proteins and viruses. The reproducibility of the purification process with respect to its ability to remove specific contaminants should also be determined. Further columns should also be validated regarding leaching of leases, that is dye, affinity leases, etc. Throughout the expected lifespan of the column, the evidence of purity of the purified product should be established. Physico-chemical, biological and immunological characterizations of purified product should be also be obtained using a wide range of analytical tests. Characterization tests of products may include mainly amino acid composition, peptide mapping, electrophoretic assays, that is STS page, Western blot, isoelectric focusing, HPLC, immunoassay, endotoxin test, potency determination test, etc. Therapeutic applications of recombinant DNA products. The use of therapeutic proteins to replace or supplement endogenous protein molecules has been a long established treatment for diseases. Applications of some important recombinant DNA products approved by FDA for human therapeutic use are described briefly in the following section. Hormones of therapeutic interest. Diabetes mellitus is one of the most common metabolic diseases in the world. It is characterized by hyperglycemia resulting from defects in insulin secretion, insulin action or both. The disease can be treated by administration of human insulin produced using S. cerevisiae or E. coli, which is structurally identical to insulin produced by the pancreas in the human body. Insulin as part is structurally identical to insulin human except for the replacement of a aspartic acid with proline at position 28 on the B chain of the molecules. It provides rapid absorption than regular human insulin. The main advantages are its long peakless action with better effects during down hours and a lower incidence of hypoglycemia. Insulin glargine, a long acting recombinant insulin, differs structurally from human insulin by the replacement of asparagine with glycine at position 21 of the A chain and addition of two arginine groups to the C terminus of the B chain. The structural modifications allow it to dissolve in an acidic solution, but it forms amorphous microprecipitate in subcutaneous tissue from which small amounts of insulin glargine are gradually released. Insulin Lispro 23 produced in E. coli is identical to human insulin except for the transportation of proline and lysine at positions 28 and 29 in the B chain. The most prominent practical advantage is rapid onset of action. Insulin glulisine 24 produced by E. coli is a rapid parenteral blood glucose lowering agent. It differs from human insulin in that the amino acid asparagine at position B3 is replaced by lysine and lysine in position B26 is replaced by glutamic acid. The availability of these new insulin analogues has the potential to significantly improve long-term control over blood glucose in diabetes patients. The gonadotrophin hormones directly or indirectly regulate reproductive functions. Insufficient endogenous production of any gonadotrophin hormone adversely affects reproductive function, which can be treated by administration of recombinant hormones. Recombinant human choriogonadotrophin produced in CHO cells is used to induce ovulation in the treatment of anovulatory infertility or as an adjunct to in vitro fertilization procedures. Recombinant follicles stimulating hormone produced from CHO cells is safe and effective in the treatment of fertility disorder. If revealed more efficient ovarian response and better quality of oocysts than did urinary FSH. Recombinant luteinizing hormone is likely to be recommended as a supplement to recombinant FSH for ovulation induction in hypogonadotropic women. It also benefits in vitro fertilization. Growth hormone is required for normal growth and metabolic homeostasis in children. Deficiency of growth hormone is characterized by an altered body composition, decreased exercise capacity, and diminished quality of life. Somatotropin, a recombinant growth hormone produced in E. coli, is identical to natural growth hormone, except that it contains an additional methionine on the N terminus of the molecule. It is used for the treatment of short stature resulting from growth hormone deficiency. It is also widely used as an adjunct in the treatment of other disorders such as intrauterine growth restriction, Turner syndrome, healthy children with short stature, and skeletal dysphasia.